Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. In today's video we're going to be taking a closer look at Gemini Jet's May 400 scale announcements. And before we get into those, let's take a look at how the last month's models turned out, of course using Gemini's release photos, which always show the aircraft from an attractive angle, but one that doesn't necessarily give you a complete picture of what they've produced. I think several of these models are looking really good. The Aeromexico Connect Embraer looks really very nice, and the scheme suits that Embraer quite well. I have to say that one's looking particularly good. I think that's one of my faves of the month. There's also, of course, a Frontier MT80, which again looks really nice. Though you've got to take into account, obviously, the mold. I'm still contemplating whether I should get this or whether I'm going to wait to see if anyone else makes it. I probably will end up picking it up. The mold is nowhere near as good as the NG one for a whole variety of reasons, but it still is an attractive model and a really classic livery. So those two especially look like they turned out very nicely, and the Helvetic E2 also looks like it's pretty good, though a little bit questionable, the nose gear tie there. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but overall that looks like a nice model as well. So I'd say those were the three picks of the releases last month. Rest of the models, they turned out okay. You've got the pair of Deltas, and the A321 looks kind of as you'd expect it to, but it does have the Wi-Fi dome at the rear, which it looks like NG Models has missed off, so that's a positive for the Gemini version. The A350 again looks okay. It's not really competitive with the upcoming Panda version, I would say, or the NG, but it still looks like it's probably fine. And then you've got a couple of Uniteds. You got that 767, and again, looks pretty good actually. The limitations of the mold are obvious with the seam and the engine join to the wing, but it still looks decent. So some okay models from last month. Chuck in the Emirates A350 and the Hawaiian 717 to wrap things up. Those models perfectly okay, with nothing to shout about. Of course, the one model that I haven't discussed is the one which didn't turn out so well, and that is the JetBlue A321 Neo. Not only is the mold awful, but somehow they've produced the most glittery model for several years. This is on a scale of Aero Classics glitter ball awfulness. Doesn't look at all like the colours on the JetBlue livery. I don't know what they've done there. So that one's not a great model, but you know, they can't all be great, I guess. So it was an okay set of releases, and all of those models, I believe, got to the United States before any tariff issues arose. So that's positive for them. It is worth pointing out on the tariff front, however, that my understanding is that Gemini have sent a letter to all US retailers saying that they will not be receiving this April set until the tariff situation is sorted out. There's simply no way that any 400 scale brand can accept tariffs of well over 100%. Even, you know, tariffs of 10 to 20% are deal breakers for a lot of retailers, I think. The margin just isn't there on these kind of model aeroplanes, and you simply cannot ramp the price up as much as you would need to for them to sell. So I get the feeling that, yeah, you can pre-order these at a lot of retailers, but you're not going to be getting them until that tariff situation is sorted out, which could be next week, could be tomorrow, could be next year. Who knows? It's a crazy situation, and the tariffs in the US, well over 100%. They're really going to cause some problems. I think that's only going to get worse month on month. But as I said, who knows? Could be resolved tomorrow. So just got to bear that in mind if you're pre-ordering models that, and you live in the USA anyway, that it's a little unclear at this point in time when they're going to show up. And I think that's the same for all brands. That's not Gemini related, though. I imagine it impacts Gemini more because they make a lot more US material and they sell a lot more of their models in the US than many of the other brands, I would say. Okay, anyway, let's get on very soon and check out these models. Before we do that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and chuck a like on the video if you're enjoying the content. And also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Northeast Diecast, who have an amazing range of models, all free of tariffs because they're largely second-hand. And they've got, as I say, a great range of really interesting models covering a large chunk of aviation history, including quite a lot of US classics, Aero classics especially, but also some NG and other brands. So check them out. They've got some really good stuff. And if you're going to buy from them, make sure that you use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order. I've been ordering from them myself and getting some really nice models. I just posted, my last video was an unboxing of the latest 4 that I received from them. I've got another parcel on the way from Northeast Diecast because I'm really liking a lot of the models that come from them, and I've been using that code Yesterday's Airlines 15, which has been given a really good saving. So make sure you use it too, Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order at northeastdiecast.com. Okay, cool. Now let's get in and check out these Gemini Jets releases. So as always with Gemini, you get a much more manageable list of models to look through in the monthly announcements because they only release 9 or 10 models a month. And we start this month with an Airbus A320 CEO in the colours of Allegiant, and the registration is N252NV. And this model has some potential, I feel. It is not obviously the first time that an Allegiant A320 has been made in 400 scale. Gemini themselves made an A320 N246NV in July 2017, and to be honest, that one didn't look particularly good. You have got the older version of this A320 mold. The nose gear is in the wrong place. The nose itself is a bit weird. The tail cone is wrong. But those things have been modified on this mold. And more recent A320s, even though they're still not in the same bracket, I would say, as those from Panda models or NG models or Aviation 400, they are still much better than this previous release. So I think it will be a much better model than this previous release. It is worth mentioning also that Panda did make a version of this aircraft, N255NV, in 2022. That was an exclusive for RM Model Store. So there is a Panda version floating around there. That's a lot rarer and harder to come by. So there are previous versions of this. This one, I think it will be okay, you know. I think it'll be better, as I say, than the original Gemini, but I'm still only going to put this into workhorse. The Gemini mold is still not great, and there have been previous versions. Next up, there is an A321, and this one is in the colours of JetBlue. We've got N2180 Juliet. It's an A321 Neo, and it's wearing what I believe is called the ribbons scheme. Again, this is not unique in the scale. N2142 Juliet was made by NG Models in February 2023, and there's no question that the NG Models mold for the A321 is so much better. It's got much better sized engines, they've got better ground clearance, it's got less chunky undercarriage, it's got a better shaped nose cone, it's just better across the entire aircraft. So even though the NG A320 is so much better, you know, the Gemini version, it's not a complete junker, but those Neo engines, yeah, they don't thrill me at all. They're way too large, and the rest of the mold is pretty ordinary. I'll just put this one into workhorse as well, and to be honest, that's probably being a little generous. The third model of the month is our first Boeing, and this one is much more interesting than the first two, in my opinion. This one is a Midwest Airlines Boeing 717-N920 Mike Echo. I am a big fan of the 717 mold that Gemini have. I've got a few of these. The most recent one I think was a Trans World Airlines version N418TW, and that was really very nice. There obviously aren't that many 717 molds floating around, but this one is definitely better than the Phoenix mold, which has just reappeared for that Qantas link release. There is a seam on this, but it's not dramatic, and the mold overall is pretty good. Certainly that TWA turned out nice. I don't see why this Midwest Express, well, it's not Midwest Express, it's Midwest Airlines one wouldn't turn out well as well. And there hasn't been a lot of activity here. There's only been one Midwest Airlines 717 release previously, and that was made by Phoenix in 2005. So a long, long time ago. This is well overdue. It's a nice scheme. Midwest was a great little airline, and one which I imagine is fairly missed. Wasn't it cookies? They serve special cookies on those flights, as I recall. This is a great model. I'm putting this one up into supersonic. I think this is an excellent, excellent release choice. Well done, Gemini. Next up, we've got a 737-800. This one is El Al 4X Echo Kilo Kilo. Yeah, I've got big issues with the 737-800 mold. Sometimes it can look okay in the Gemini official release videos. For example, if you look at the release videos for release images, for N76516, a recent United Star Alliance scheme that was made in February, then the official image looks okay. But then when you see images from other websites of the aircraft side on, it still has all the issues that that mold has. The nose gear is chunky, the nose gear door is even chunkier, the nose shape isn't great, the wings isn't too low, the engine's drag along the floor, it's kind of got a tail down example, and it's just not great, to be honest. And it's vastly inferior to other 737-800s that are out there. The Panda models again, NG models again, there's an Aero Polaris mold. These are all much better than this. In fact, this mold really is very poor, and one which I would like to see JC Wings replace, because it just isn't up to standards. Now, if you're looking at the El Al release here, then interestingly, it isn't in the new El Al scheme. It is in the previous El Al scheme, which has the silver and blue accents to it. Now, the new El Al scheme is out and on some 737-800s, and they get rid of silver, and it's mainly just blue with a darker blue and more blue at the rear of the aircraft. Now, to be honest, I think I prefer the older scheme that this model is showing here, but it's interesting that Gemini are not releasing this newer version. You get the feeling that they'd already made this model and it's just been kind of waiting to get a release. So it's a little bit unusual, I would say, that they're not making the latest livery, which has had a release from Phoenix on a 787. Presumably it will show up in the future. Yeah, there isn't a lot to say. I haven't got a big problem with El Al itself and the livery. In fact, like I say, I prefer this one, but the mold is so bad, I'm going to put this one in the gas guzzler. Next up on our list of release models here is another 737, but this one is going to get a much more favourable review from me because it's a MAX 8, and I much prefer the Gemini JC Wings 737 MAX 8. As you can see from these pictures of a Norwegian release that I reviewed many years ago now, the mold is better proportioned. The nose, the wings, the undercarriage, the tail, just generally it's a better mold across the board, and I quite like it, and it's certainly one which I'm quite happy to purchase. I've got quite a few JC Wings examples. It's not necessarily as good as the NG version, but it's still pretty decent, and I haven't got any problems with it. And this first release here is a really good choice from Gemini. It is in the colours of TUI Airways, the British version of the TUI group, and the registration is G Tango Uniform Mike Yankee. And it should be really nice. There hasn't been a lot of activity in this space previously. There is a release from Phoenix that was made in October 2023. They made Mike Foxtrot, and to be honest, it doesn't look dreadful. It doesn't look dreadful, but it's not quite as good a mold, I think, as this one. And it's still been a few years since they made it too. So I think this is a really good choice, and I think it should turn out really nicely. I think it'll be very popular in the UK market, which is a market I feel that Gemini are increasingly going to need if these tariffs don't go away soon. So I think this is a great choice, and I'm going to put this one up into supersonic as well. Okay, and that is 5 narrow body releases out of the way, which means we've just got some wide bodies left to discuss in this video. And the first one up is a United Airlines 7878. And this one is registered N26902. I've been discussing this quite a bit recently because, as I said, I think in the last video I did, the NG announcements, there have been a spate of these recently. So we've had N4905 from Phoenix from towards the end of last year. That one turned out looking pretty good. And just last month we've had that same reg plus this one, N26902 from NG models, and the pictures of those NG releases are up and available now, and they look really good. So this new Gemini version has got a lot of competition. It's got the Phoenix, which is pretty good, and it's got the NG, which looks excellent. So that's a strong set of competing models to go up against. Now, it can do it because the JC Wings Gemini 7878 is a really nice release, a really good mold, but it is a bit questionable about whether we really need this many versions of this, and I guess ultimately there's probably a market, or at least there was before tariffs. So it's not a bad release by any means. I think it's perfectly reasonable, but I think I'll probably just put this one into Workhorse and leave it there. If it hadn't been released already on an excellent alternative mold, it would get higher, but it's just following up what is already a great mold. I'd probably get the NG version myself if I wanted to get this. Our first 7879 of the month is also United Airlines, and this one is N24988, and it's wearing this "The Future is SAF" livery, and it comes in flaps up and flaps down. This is a really cool scheme, actually. Often United special schemes aren't particularly interesting. This one is really nice. I believe, as I recall, it's also been released on a 737, and that model's been made in 400 scale already. But this scheme on the 787 has not been made in 400 scale yet. So this is the first time that we're getting a release of this. And obviously the flaps up and flaps down options are always really good. So this one's much higher in my thoughts than the previous model because it hasn't been made before. The mold is going to be excellent, and you've got that option for a flaps down version too. So this one's really good. I'm going to put this one up into Supersonic. The last commercial release of the month is also flaps up and down, and a 7879, and this one is in the colours of Saudia, or one of those newer Saudia schemes. And I think this one celebrates the Saudian National Day or something like that. To be honest, I really like this scheme. I think I've said that before because it has been made previously. It was made, or it was announced in October by Phoenix, and that model is out, and the scheme and the model both look really nice. Once again, Phoenix have improved their 787s quite a bit with new wings and new detailing on the underside of the fuselage, and they're much more competitive than they used to be. They're still not quite at the same standard as the Gemini JC 7879, so this is another good option, and again you get that flaps down opportunity if that's something you like. So I think that this is again a nice release and a good complement to the Phoenix, and I don't feel like there's too many of these flying around. Saudia isn't necessarily an airline I particularly like, but at the same time this scheme is pretty cool and I do like it, and I'm going to put this one up into High Flyer. I think it's a solid choice, and again flaps up and down. I really like that choice that you get with those options. So yeah, that's decent in my opinion too. Now the last model of the month is a Gemini Max. This one is another C17. This one is in the colours of the March Air Force Reserve base, and it isn't the first time obviously that they've released one in these colours. They made one in the same March Air Force Reserve colours in 2022, so it's been a few years, but obviously there have been well over 30 Gemini C-17s made in US Air Force colours. They all effectively look very similar because you just get that, or mostly you just get that tail sash, which is slightly different there depending on which base they are at. So there's not a lot more to say about these. You've got to say that the mould is getting a bit long in the tooth. They have added aerials to it, but it's still got this massive cradle over the top. It's okay, it's not spectacular, and it would have been nice to see an updated C-17 mould without that huge over fuselage seam. So yeah, I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse. Both the mould, very dated nowadays, and the fact that we've had a whole series of these, including one in the same colours, don't mean it, doesn't warrant getting a higher ranking. Okay, and that is a roundup of the Gemini April announcements, which may arrive in the United States this year at some point and may not. Who knows what's going to happen? But overall, just focusing on the models here, we've got, a fairly standard Gemini sort of set with some really nice choices that are quite, in my opinion, high flying models like the Midwest 717, the 2E Max, and that United 7879. Got some other worthy models like the Saudia, and then you've got a selection of kind of less impressive models that are using weaker molds or have been made a lot before. It's fairly standard, and the airlines here, again, standard Gemini territory, but it's still good to see that they are picking some interesting releases, and it is tempting for me to get the Midwest 717, I admit. So perfectly reasonable month from Gemini, nothing to really scream about, but at the same time nothing to get overly excited about either. It will be interesting to see when these turn up, as I say. Who knows? Presumably they'll get out to the rest of the world in standard sort of times, but that's just the way it is. Things coming from China now are obviously going to suffer delays unless the tariff situation resolves itself. Okay, cool. Anyway, that is it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed having a look at this release set. JC Wings also announced, I think, just about a week ago, so there will be a ranking video coming for them as well. But in the meantime, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.